Okay, think about this for a second. What if I told you that just by being awake right now, your brain is actively accumulating a massive biological debt? Seriously, just the simple act of existing, reading emails, sitting in traffic, stressing over a project, it creates a compounding neurological cost. We usually think of sleep as just a passive pause button, right? A surrender to exhaustion at the end of a long day, but modern neuroscience is telling us a completely different story. Today, we're diving deep into the profound architecture of brain recovery. We're going to unpack nervous system regulation, why we burn out, and how you can actively optimize your longevity.
Which brings us to a really critical question. Why does just being awake inevitably break the brain down? Look, for a lot of us, modern life feels like navigating a constant state of cognitive fatigue and brain fog. And what do? We try to just push through it with another cup of coffee and sheer willpower. But that tension you feel, that very real sense of cortisol overload and burnout, isn't just in your mind. Well, actually, it is physically happening inside your skull. Waking life comes at a steep biological price, and to understand why, we need to look at what your neurons are actually up to while your eyes are open.
It all comes down to a biological process called synaptic potentiation. When you're awake, your brain is highly plastic. Every single new experience, every stressor, every random fact you absorb causes your neural circuits to strengthen and wire together. Now, obviously, this is amazing for learning, but it requires a staggering amount of physical energy. Your synapses are literally swelling with activity all day long. Stay awake too long, and these circuits just get completely saturated. They run out of physical space and energy, leading straight to cognitive overload. Your brain simply cannot sustain that upward trajectory of strengthening connections forever without burning out. And the immediate cost of this overload is profound. In a healthy, fully rested state, you have a region of your brain called the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, and it acts kind of like the executive manager of your mind. It exerts strong top-down control over your amygdala, which is your brain's emotional and threat detection center. It keeps you calm, rational, and emotionally grounded. But when you're sleep deprived, that vital connection basically just snaps. The prefrontal cortex becomes functionally isolated. The executive manager literally leaves the building, leaving your emotional center completely unchecked. Without that top-down control, your amygdala goes totally rogue. Research actually shows a 60% increase in reactivity to negative emotional stimuli when you're lacking sleep. We have all been there, right? Snapping at a partner, feeling totally overwhelmed by a standard email, or leaning hard into immediate gratification things like late-night doom scrolling or junk food. You have to understand, this isn't a lack of discipline. It's your brain physically reverting to a primitive, emotionally volatile, high-stress survival mode because its higher-order structures have temporarily shut down. So, how do we fix this? Enter the night shift, synaptic homeostasis and pruning. To explain how we actually recover from all this daytime saturation, neuroscientists developed something called the synaptic homeostasis hypothesis, or SHY. This theory proposes that sleep is basically the non-negotiable price we pay for daytime brain plasticity. Because our synapses get so incredibly dense and saturated during the day, they absolutely have to be downscaled at night. If this didn't happen, we'd face runaway potentiation. Our circuits would quite literally burn out, and we wouldn't have any physical space to learn anything new the next day. Sleep is what prunes back all that noise, restoring your balance and cognitive clarity. You can see this mechanism perfectly mapped out here with the process S-curve. Notice how that red line steadily rises during the yellow waking phase. That's your synaptic strength building up, day by day, hour by hour, until it hits a saturation point. But then, look at that sharp green drop during the blue sleep phase. That is the downscaling. It's an incredibly elegant, tightly regulated system of electrical pruning. It's designed to ensure you wake up with a brain that's rested, efficient, and ready to absorb the world all over again. Which brings us to the physical reset, the deep clean, the brain's wash cycle. This absolutely blew my mind when I first learned about it. Discovered pretty recently, back in 2012, the glymphatic system is a total revelation in neuroscience. See, the rest of your body has a lymphatic system to clear out waste, but your brain doesn't. Instead, it relies on this highly specific, glia-dependent network to purge toxic metabolic waste. During the day, the system is basically shut off, but at night, your brain literally shifts its physical structure to pump cerebrospinal fluid right through its tissues, essentially power washing away the toxic byproducts of the day's heavy mental lifting. And here is the most staggering metric of this whole process: 60%. As you drift into deep non-REM sleep, the stress chemicals in your brain, specifically your noradrenergic tone, drop dramatically. When that happens, the physical space between your brain cells actually expands by 60%. This massive structural expansion drastically drops the resistance to fluid flow, allowing that cerebrospinal fluid to just rush in and do its deep clean.
But here's the catch. What happens when you skip that power wash? If you disrupt your deep sleep, that 60% expansion never happens, and your glymphatic system just stalls out. Studies are showing that just a single night of disrupted sleep increases the levels of a toxic protein called soluble amyloid beta by 10%. A week of poor sleep spikes your tau protein levels. These are the exact proteins that clump together to form plaques and tangles, heavily accelerating the risk of Alzheimer's disease and cognitive decline. So protecting your sleep is quite literally protecting your long-term memory and longevity. Okay, so how do we actively hack this? Let's talk about optimizing deep sleep.
One of the absolute most promising, accessible interventions for optimizing this recovery is pink noise. Now, you've probably heard of white noise, that harsh, hissing TV static sound. Pink noise is different. Its power decreases as its frequency increases, which creates this incredibly balanced, deep sound that directly mimics biological systems and natural environments, like a steady rainfall or ocean waves. Listening to continuous pink noise has actually been shown to reduce brainwave complexity while you're awake and then significantly improve the percentage of stable, deep, restorative sleep you get at night.
And science is taking this a step further with closed-loop auditory stimulation. This isn't just turning on a sound machine and hoping for the best. It's about absolute precision timing. By monitoring brainwaves, scientists can deliver discrete pulses of pink noise at the exact millisecond your brain enters the up state of a slow oscillation. This perfectly timed acoustic pulse acts almost like a biological cheerleader. It amplifies your slow waves, triggers deeper sharp wave ripples in the hippocampus, and syncs everything up flawlessly. By safely enhancing the brain's natural slow waves with sound, we can massively deepen that biological reset and boost memory consolidation. This all brings us to a profound realization, which was perfectly captured by Dr. Maiken Nettergaard, a true pioneer in glymphatic research. She says, sleep is not a quiet or inactive state. What is emerging now is the idea that sleep is also a highly organized fluid transport state that helps maintain brain health. Sleep is not a passive surrender to the day. It is a highly active, architectural deep clean. It is the literal foundation of your emotional resilience, your dopamine balance, and your nervous system regulation. So, knowing what you know now, knowing that every single waking moment carries a biological cost, that your synapses are swelling and your emotional centers are fighting just to stay regulated, how are you going to orchestrate your night shift? How will you set up your environment tonight to repay that neurological death? The entire quality of your waking life depends on the reverence you show for your sleep. Think about that tonight when you turn off the lights.